Hey there toy collector friends and Transformers fans alike. Welcome back to the channel. I'm the time travelling toy collector and these are three Autobot heroes first making their screen debut in the 2000, well in the film set in the 2000s, but it's actually the 1986 Transformers animated movie. We have Blurr, we have Cup, we have Hot Rod, and this is in their G1 form. Now I don't usually do a Robo review where I've got more than one figure at a time, but this is a preliminary video prior to doing each of these three on their own and giving them their own solo shot. I wanted to do this really because I'd recently come across, while clearing through some stuff, my old collection of Transformers comics, and one of the things I found within my collection of comics was that in the UK, that is, the Marvel series, which was Target 2006, I think it was called, and in it, Cup, Hot Rod and Blurr travel back in time from the point at which they're currently they're busy fighting Unicron, etc. But they're sent by Unicron, so spoilers if you don't know the story, to stop another three time traveling Transformers, albeit this time Decepticons in the shape of Galvatron, Scourge and Cyclonus, who've come back in time to do naughty things to try and disrupt their timeline. Anyway, I'm not going to go into details of that right now, but these three figures have of course since been released within the Studio 86 range, and I'm going to be looking at these three figures within the Studio 86 range very shortly. So keep an eye out on my channel for those videos. But I wanted to see these guys together because they were released together along with the other futuristic Transformers that formed part of the toy wave that came out in conjunction with the motion picture. Now, there's a lot of online talk and available info about the nature of the character development of these figures and their other Decepticon counterparts in relation to the big screen versions. As I recall, and apologies if I'm getting any of this incorrect, there'll be people who are far more Transformer aficionados than I who'll be able to give you much more detail on this. But as I recall, in an unusual turn of events for Transformers lore, for the first time the figures were being defined in the story narrative first, and then being converted into actual figures and toys to be released. So whereas everything in Generation 1 up till this point had been repaints, recastings, remodelings of like Diaclone figures and such like, this wave was unique, brand new and unique to the Transformers collection. So we had very distinct characters being introduced for the very first time as part of the Transformers universe. Cup, bless him, he's a bit of an old timer, and he's demonstrating that as his joints, much like mine, aren't what they used to be. So let's see if I can pick him back up again without him taking a dive. But they are, one of the things I like about the figures as a trio is they do kind of complement each other. Now I know we've got sort of slightly more muted tones here with the likes of Blurr and the likes of Cup, and slightly less muted tones around Hot Rod. However, they do complement themselves. They work very well as a trio of characters, certainly within the comic book narrative, and what little time they spent together on screen. But I remember the Christmas, as I don't think it's a false memory, but I got all three of these for Christmas, the same Christmas, because they in my head were a set. So I think I managed to convince my parents and extended family that they had to come as a set, otherwise they wouldn't work. They do look very different in shape and tone to their G1 earlier counterparts, because again they have been developed in a very different way. But what I would like to point out here is, yes, yeah, before anyone says it, they don't have any of the articulation really that we'd expect to see nowadays in their legs, for example. But they do at least have legs. You know, they are very clearly and distinctly robotic forms that are kind of humanoid. I don't want to say humanoid because I don't want to devalue some of the appearances of more recent Transformer toys, should we say, which quite clearly don't follow that sort of personification formula of 2 arms, 2 legs and a head. But they, compared to some of their, as I say, Generation 1 counterparts, these figures really do look like robots. They don't just look like someone's taken a vehicle, pulled it apart and made it stand up and stuck a head in it and called it a robot. The beauty of having these as futuristic vehicles means that they can get away with having forms that support their robot mode. Again, are they? Did the big screen capture them much? Cup's not having any of it. It's my own enthusiasm keeps sending him over the edge, and he's taken poor Hot Rod with him. Mind you, there are many people who might think that someone should have taken Hot Rod out a while ago, given what he got up to in the Transformers movie. But we won't talk about his relationship with Optimus Prime's demise at this juncture. Oh no, we shall not. So this was just really I wanted this to be a kind of a brief real reflection on where these figures are as a trio within my love of the Transformers collection, bearing in mind, and some of you will know this already from what I've told you about my approach to collecting the Transformers. I wasn't into collecting the Transformer, the Decepticon jets or the Autobot cars. I was interested in the slightly more unusual, the slightly more standout editions. I at the time I started looking at them had no idea about the biographies of the characters or the extended narrative in the comics or the cartoons. I hadn't really had any access or sight of those, so I was really just interested in the playability of the toys, hence my attraction in the first instance to the Dinobot range, and then to some of the slightly larger ones such as Optimus Prime, Megatron, then of course that expanded into Galvatron and Ultra Magnus, Metroplex, you name it. If it wasn't just a bog standard car or a jet, I was probably going to be interested in it. I was very interested in getting my hands on Soundwave because I really loved that he could transform into a cassette deck, and by the time I would realise my level of interest, I couldn't find him anywhere. I'm pleased to say I've subsequently been able to get my hands on one, but alas, he wasn't there with me in my formative years. So coming back to these 3 very distinct bots here, there's a lot to like about these figures. They were characterized very well, I think, in terms of how they were set up, in terms of how their bios were written. I don't know what we think about them as individual Transformers, and again, as I say, I'm going to do individual Robo reflection reviews on all 3 of them in the very near future, particularly as I'm also going to be looking at their Studio Series 86 counterparts, which, as we've seen from other Studio Series 86 range figures, the quality of the transformations, the engineering and so on and so forth is pretty top notch, particularly when you then take it back in time to the 1980s and you're looking at what was state-of-the-art engineering then. So I'm not going to pull them apart or go too close for this video, but I am going to be very pleased to just put this video out and say stay tuned, because we're going to be looking at Cup, Hot Rod and Blurr in their own individual videos, looking at their G1 versions, and close on their heels will be the Studio Series 86 versions are of Cup, Hot Rod and Blurr, before we move on with some of the other Studio Series 86 figures as well. But yeah, so I have a real affinity with these, and I also am very, very mindful that they made sort of their UK debut within the Marvel Comics. I was really taken with them and how different they looked. I think it was very striking. So yeah, so in terms of Autobot cars, they became the first Autobot cars that really I felt that I needed to get, because they heralded for me a sort of a sea change in what Transformers look like. They did come round again as current modern day iterations with the exact same molds, only this time they were accompanied by tiny little Nebulon. I've taken them all out because I've mentioned the word Nebulon and they've all passed out. The Nebulon figures, which were made them into Target Masters. That was a range that sort of, again, for me, that came out at the back end of my level of interest. So Target Masters and original Headmasters, the whole sort of Nebulon extended universe storyline didn't really connect with me. So I can't really talk about these characters from the point of view of when they had their Nebulon equivalents, but I can talk about their very first appearances as G1 figures, which was on the back of the arrival of the 1986 movie experience and their appearance in sort of 1985-1986 Marvel Comics in the UK, and subsequent appearances thereafter, which served as a really good bridge for me to start to understand the wider Transformers universe, because that particular story also introduced Galvatron, also introduced Ultra Magnus, and a whole range of Cybertronian characters in the present day, as well as a prelude to what the movie would bring us as well. So whilst these characters had a very fleeting appearance, considering they were existing at the time 20-30 years in the future, they made an indelible impression on me, to the point where I thought, no, these are great, I have to have them, they're so different, they're so stand out, and they really are. They really are, and I'm hoping that my individual videos will enable us to see that in a bit more detail. But some of the panels, this is what I was going to say to you before they all fell over. Some of the panels from those Marvel comics, I may also pull those out when I'm looking at these as individual figures, just to sort of give you a bit more context in terms of my own reflections on these guys, around how special they are, and how special they are to me. They hold a very dear place in my heart, because for me they, if you like, secured my interest in the Transformers range. Yes, Dinobots. Yes, larger figures that were made of multiple parts, like Optimus Prime or Megatron. But in terms of the army, the characters, the extended story play of the Transformers world, this is where for me it began. These three, and of course the other three, in being Galvatron, Cyclonus and Scourge. So you may have similar thoughts on that. You may have similar memories and recollections. If you do, that's fantastic. I would love to hear about them. Do please write a comment down below to let me know your first experiences, encounters with Hot Rod, Cup and Blurr. Do you have some of the same memories I do around their appearances in the 1985-86 Marvel Comics in the UK? Do you have a different way of accessing these figures in terms of your memory? Do they link to a different part of your life? Did you never ever see these before and are just really getting into the Studio Series 86 range and going, wow, these are great figures? By the way, this was their origin story as they first appeared in your actual plastic. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Some of my earlier toy photography does feature these three characters, so by all means head over to my Instagram page. It's the Time Traveling Toy Collector, and have a look around there. You might see some things that interest you, particularly if you're a fan of old school Transformers. And yeah, you know, give the page a follow. I'd be very, very grateful and appreciative. Similarly, if this has been interesting for you and you found it to be triggering some of your old memories and nurturing some grains of nostalgia, then that's fantastic. Do please hit that thumbs up and let me know that I've rekindled this in you. Similarly, you might want to subscribe to the channel, because that would be fantastic. And if you want, you could turn on notifications so that you don't miss any upcoming videos where I look at in more detail and also transform Cup, Hot Rod and Blurr, both in their Generation 1 formats and also in their Studio Series 86 formats as well. That's probably all that I have to say for this video. It was really just to say a big shout out to these three characters and sort of situate them in Transformers lore as far as I'm concerned. So if it is something that sort of resonates with you, that's great. Please do stick around and watch more of the videos and follow for upcoming videos. In the meantime, it just remains for me to say thank you for sticking around for the last 16 or 17 minutes. You've been a fantastic audience. I've been the Time Travelling Toy Collector, and these have been Blurr, Cup, Hot Rod in their Generation 1 format. I will be back soon with some more videos. I hope to see you then too. In the meantime, transform, roll out, and remember that a thing of beauty truly is a toy forever. Take care.